Thanks for an exciting and very inspiring set of talks. And now I get to introduce Despina Cantus, who's going to moderate and lead our next session, which is on AI translation and value. This is going to be a panel discussion, so I want to go ahead and bring up, and we'll allow discussion, we'll allow questions as much as you all want, but I wanted to go ahead and give us the opportunity to go ahead and have a panel format at this point. So we have Murdoch Riley, Michael Miller, we have Beth and Paryagan. Thank you. Please have a seat and we'll get started.
So it's wonderful to be here today. I'm Despina Cantus. I'm a computer scientist by training here at Columbia for a little more than 2 years now. It's been a while, but it feels like yesterday. Almost a year ago, we launched SymBid around this time. I'm very excited to be joining Stella today and everybody else in joining CADRe, which is going to be a major center pushing forward the translation of AI tools that we're going to talk now, but in general, diagnostic, new diagnostic tests and devices. I've known Stella for quite some time, even before we both joined Columbia, same as Ajay, and it's been really super exciting for all of us to come together here and work together in various fronts. So SymBid and CADRe, are they first cousins or just siblings? I think it was just basically probably like siblings, but not the ones that fight with each other all the time and like steal each other's toys, like not like my kids right now. No, we're grown siblings where you actually like appreciate your sibling, right? It comes in life. So I'm super excited to work with Stella. We talk a lot about the translation of the AI tools. We talk a lot about the evaluation of AI tools. I'm an engineer and a computer scientist. And a lot of times I tell to my fellow physicians and colleagues that I'm the one who makes the gadgets, but I'm not in any way qualified to tell you if this would actually work in a clinic, because for a tool to work in a clinic, it goes way beyond whether or not in a laboratory setting it has a good AUC. I mean, that's easy stuff, right? It goes even well beyond doing a silent deployment. It goes way beyond having an independent evaluation. That's all great to publish papers and say that you have a tool that's supposed to do what it's supposed to do, predict something, detect something, whatever it does. But then you put it in a health system and you have to figure out how it affects the workflow. How does it do compared to current standards? How does it affect the physician? How do you communicate the result to patient? And a prime example along those lines is, I've worked in breast cancer research for almost like 20 years now. And still when I go get my mammogram and I get that letter about breast cancer risk and mammographic density and what I'm supposed to do with that, I don't know what to do with that. Like I call my division chief and say, do you want me to get an MR? Like, what's this, right? So communicating to patients the information. And when it comes to the AI tools, a lot of these technologies are disruptive, and there's structures around it. Beth talked about governance, and I can't wait to get into that because I have a thing about governance. We'll talk about that later. And so when it comes to the evaluation of AI tools, evaluation in my mind also needs to evaluate how a tool does in the context of a healthcare system beyond just its accuracy. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have Stella and her leadership and the team that she's putting together through CADRe to kind of help us pave this way forward. And so this panel is about the AI translation and value. Some of the speakers, maybe we'll do a quick round of introductions since some of you spoke, some of you haven't, spoke today. So maybe we'll start, and to focus a little bit, give some context on our discussion. I'd love for everybody to say like 1 or 2 sentences of how their role, interplays with this sort of concept of AI translation. Let's focus a little bit on that so we can have a better sense of how the answers to the questions are coming from as we go through.
Director of the Irving Institute and Vice Dean for Clinical Translation Research. So I'm here to help to try and ease the path of translational research, including the use of AI tools, whether it's in an early stage, T1 type of stage research, or all the way through to clinical applications, learning health systems, and real world data, and then implementation within communities and population. I'm a cardiologist. I see patients occasionally, and I use a lot of AI and large language models around imaging and genomic data for the atherosclerosis research that I do in the lab.
Hi, I'm Beth Percha. You all met me this morning already, but I'm New York Presbyterian's Chief Data and Analytics Officer. AI interacts with my work in a number of ways. First is a data platform build, obviously is going to leverage a lot of AI tooling, both for coding as well as for information extraction from clinical text. As I mentioned, I also, in collaboration with Columbia Tech Ventures, I lead NYP's IP office. So we recently did our very first licensing deal of de-identified training data to a company that was the result of a research project between Columbia and NYP. So we had those discussions around, AI tools consume data, what's appropriate use of that data, what are, for commercial applications. I've been involved in a lot of those discussions. And I also chair our tripartite AI governance committee, which includes obviously people from Columbia, Cornell, and NYP, and we evaluate all new AI technologies that are coming through the health system. So I have lots of opinions on all this, and I look forward to the panel.
Hey everyone, so I gave my brief overview in the morning as well. So if you're gonna look into my academic name, that's Parminder, that's where a lot of publications might come out. I also go by Parry. Either one is fine, pick your person. So talking about AI, so I currently lead AI across GE Healthcare from product, science, as well as engineering standpoint. How do we bring out a lot of great AI capabilities with our partners, with our businesses internally into our products out there as well, whether it goes into our devices, into our digital products, as well as connecting them together across clinical and operational workflows. With AI, a lot of areas. I think that is the outcome. But I think as we talked about, how do we create governance? How do we create scale? How do we create data partnerships, clinical partnerships, tech partnerships to really accelerate that innovation in that space? And then we'll talk about that today as well. But where I see AI becoming a glue in a lot of ways as well. In the last 3 years, we have seen a lot more collaborations and partnerships that have really accelerated things way at an exponential pace than any time in the past. So I call it quite prominently as well, like AI is a glue that brings a lot of tech, a lot of healthcare systems, medtech companies like us really help integrate into the workflow, but working with our customers, partners, physicians, radiologists to make sure they are integrated correctly, have the right set of adoption and skills as well. Prior to that, I was at Amazon leading healthcare life sciences for about 7 to 8 years. So a lot of clinical NLP research. So Compton Medical was one of the first healthcare-specific NLP service on the cloud. So I was one of the founders for that. And then kind of accelerating from oncology to other areas across those. Last 2 to 3 years was leading a lot of foundation models, so going into billions and billions of parameter models. And that was the time that kind of brought me to G Healthcare and back to healthcare, because the technology was prime time ready for healthcare than anything in the past. So in today's discussion, I look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts, and more broadly, how do we take it to translation? That is one of the most important topics. Last 10 years is about like, is AI useful? Now it's about how. And that discussion has changed predominantly, and that's where I want to see today's discussion as well, on how do we take it towards how we can incorporate that, because we know the value gains it brings it, but without translation, it would stay, I would say, in the publication side of things as well. So taking from publications, from theory to action is where a lot of time I spend across my time at G Healthcare.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Miller. I'm an attending pathologist here in the Department of Pathology and Cell Biology. I'm also the director of digital pathology. And as a pathologist, the field for us, we're actually slightly or severely behind radiology. We're only now recently digitizing our cases moving forward. We're still using glass slides and desktop microscopes. So AI's been great for a variety of reasons in my field. Particularly, it's catalyzed kind of this digital transformation. Also, new technologies have recently been developed that really have allowed us at scale to transition to digital pathology for primary diagnosis, which is something that we do here now, actually across the entire enterprise. It was an enterprise-wide initiative that we deployed a little over a year ago. And kind of the perspective that I've noticed is that pathology has a lot to learn from radiology in terms of standard development. We don't really have digital pathology standards. How data is transferred in this ecosystem has not been well established yet. Annotations, results, how that data is transferred from one silo where it's performed to the EHR or even the laboratory information system, which is what the pathologists use. Those things need to really be fleshed out moving forward. And I think we're positioned through the center and through the other infrastructure here at Columbia to really be a leading voice in that effort, which is something I'm really excited to be a part of. Also, AI usability. I mean, as Despina was saying, you can have the best model, but if the pathologist, I'm one of the end users, but if I can't easily access that information, or I'm like stuck behind a password prompt that I need to consistently put in like 20 times an hour, it doesn't matter. So these small, like important barriers, we need to have a variety of stakeholders at the table, from IT, domain-specific experts, navigating these complex processes to really make sure that what we deploy can be used in a meaningful way. And that's something I'm really excited about.
Hi, I'm Stella. I'm an abdominal radiologist. That's my clinical background. And I'm vice chair for clinical research in the Department of Radiology. As mentioned earlier this morning, I've been at Columbia a year and a few months now. And as I said, it's really exceeded all expectations I had coming in. I mean, everyone from the trainees and the medical students and undergrads I meet all the way up through our institutional leaders, really the best people that I could ever ask to work with. So with that, I want to get us started on this panel. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So let's start with a question that may sound a little bit too broad on purpose, but I want everybody to focus on saying, go around the other way maybe, and everybody saying one thing for each of those things that I'm going to ask. So and then we can dive in. Let's see what themes arise. So where do you see the biggest opportunities, but also the biggest challenges for the clinical translation of AI? And this can be an open topic. We can write like a whole book about it. But I would like everybody to say, like, if they could pick one opportunity, but also one challenge that they could hammer overnight, what would that be?
Yeah, just the context, operationalizing it within a really tough and heterogeneous way that we have to think about deploying in different environments.
Yeah, I think implementation is really challenging, and there needs to be a lot of people in the room to make a decision, and just share decision making, and governing that process is a big challenge.
I can take probably an hour on this topic. I would say 3 topics become important over here. The first thing is data from validation standpoint. You need to have data in the right way for models to perform what they're supposed to do. So that would be one of the first things. Making sure the technology is thought to be integrated into the workflows versus coming out with separate components at a time as well. So that also is one of the key areas to make sure technology is not adding another screen or another terminal or prompt in those areas as well. So that's another area that where it becomes important. And the third one is mainly, and that's coming more and more important with the advancement of technologies, is model monitoring. Like, how do you create that feedback loop across the board as well? So that is a big topic for us to think through. And the reason is your iPhone gets updated every 2 to 3 weeks. A lot of your AI algorithms could stay for months or years, right? So if you think from the gravity of that standpoint, monitoring becomes even more important in that space. So I would say these 3 points are really big, which is monitoring, workflow, and data.
It's funny, I took this in a slightly different direction. I was thinking about opportunities in terms of specific domains. There are 2 that I'm really excited about. One is signal and image interpretation. I think, any processing of an EKG or a radiology image, these are areas that are obviously of incredible promise, where we've seen sometimes machine performance outclass humans on many tasks. It's fascinating. Another area is, as I mentioned earlier, text processing. These modern LLM models have the ability to unlock so much value that is hidden in unstructured text, and so much of medicine is still documented in unstructured text, and I find there to be incredible potential there. The most interesting challenge that I think we'll all have to confront is really just how comfortable are we relying on these types of automation? Because you get to a certain point, but at the end of the day, somebody has to be responsible for that output. And so even if the algorithm is better than the human, at some point someone's going to have to look at that thing and be accountable for it. Same thing with text. We can't just use a LLM to curate our registry and send it off to the DOH without anyone looking at it. You have to have certifications to do that. So humans are still in the loop. And I think that the opportunity and the set of questions that are going to come up rapidly is, at what point do we become comfortable with automating or allowing the AI to do some of these tasks if it's provably better? That's the phase transition that either will or won't happen.
So I'll add a little bit of a different perspective too from background. I'll take what Mike was saying a little bit. Of three things I'd say are areas of opportunity and challenge. The first is creating the environment for the stakeholders to come together in a interdisciplinary collaborative way where it feels synergistic and not kind of, not the negative kind of like, this is not going to actually help me, it's going to just use my time. So creating the environment for stakeholders to come together to think about the problem and design for impact and design for implementation. Number two is with that to create the data shared ecosystems at the Columbia level. We have to look after our own shop first so that digital pathology, imaging, EHR, genomics, biobank are really coming together in the same ecosystem. And that's a challenge here for a variety of reasons, but it's one that we can work on and are working on. And then I think at the two other layers are at the Columbia ecosystem with its partners on the tripartite, we have to come together around research questions and operational questions and create a culture of being nimble and kind of action-oriented to try and move the questions forward in an efficient and an effective way. And I think in the last year with Beth and with others, there's been more work done in the space across the tripartite than there ever was before. Yet it remains true that we are not that nimble. And you have your lunch eaten by whatever your competitor is if you can't be efficient in this space. And the last is we need to get out of our own lane, which is hard to do sometimes at Columbia and MIT, and just think up front about what is the ecosystem nationally that we can design with from the get-go to have places for cross-validations, collaborations, and parallel or sequential work. And there's networks in radiology, there's networks in cancer, there's networks in the CTSA, there's networks in different environments. We should be plugging in the design into a network so that we're actually creating a test, learning from that, refining, but also disseminating and testing and validating really in a sequence or in a parallel so that we are actually fairly quick about the implementation side.
So it sounds from everybody there's a lot of potential. Obviously, I think everybody understands that, like from workflow optimization things, from acquisition of data, imaging, to processing, to modeling, to analytics, to all these things. I can't help it sometimes with my simple solution-oriented engineering mind, wondering when I'm part of discussions like this, either larger groups about the translation, like whether or not we, the humans, are overcomplicating this. And especially, I think, in the context of an academic medical center. I mean, this technology is moving with the speed of light. I can say, I love AI because I've been in this world for many, many years now, before it was an interesting thing. And I'm starting to do everything with AI, and I love it. Like, it's like so good. It makes me more efficient. It reduces the time that I do mundane things. Like, I just want everybody to use it, right? And so I'm worried a little bit that in an academic setting, there are a lot of complexities between university, health system, this, that, whatever, that makes, tripartite, but it's also a very interesting addition to our mix here, right? But like when you look outside in like private entities, industry, big tech, private practices, I'm worried that those are adopting these technologies way quicker, that the quote consumers, which are the patient, the public, whatever, love it because, for example, it can make so much easier basic stuff, scheduling an appointment, than having to call and wait and be bumped and just go online and pick your slot and have it all automated. But some basic things. I'm not even talking about, the super exciting things we saw today. And I'm worried a little bit that there's going to be a competition, both in academia and in medicine, that, practices that adopt these kind of technologies quicker, they're going to be more efficient, more effective, able to deliver care in new ways, reduce cost, and they're going to outpace us because we're just so slow. And maybe I'll start with Beth from this. I'll start with Beth with this. Like, governance is great. We need to have like some blueprint, some understanding. We can't just live with Wild West. It's not a good thing. But what is a good balance between governance structures around this type of translation and actually getting things done, so to speak? Because from an engineering perspective, I'm thinking with my simple engineer IT mind here, like it's not difficult to connect the dots and make system A talk to system B. I mean, yes, it takes some work, but it's not rocket science. To me, I find that the challenge in the translation, in my humble view, is more in the humans than the IT or the AI itself. And then, of course, there's a lot of ethics question about evaluations and so forth. But I would also like to pose the question, is it ethical to know that we have such great tools and not making them available to the patients? Like, where is the line of ethics? Knowing that you can do something so much better and not doing it? Or going around in circles forever because you're scared that something may not pan out exactly as you want it to be, when you know there's also possibility for human error in humans. Like, it's not like all the humans are like perfect. So
Do you want me to answer all of that?
in your very honest way, you direct way.
I'll tell you how Murdoch just said, talk about anything you want. Okay, I'm not punting on this, but I don't think our governance process is the issue here.
In general,
Because,
yes.
I think it has challenges, but I think we've gotten to a good place with some of the tooling where we've said, you know, we're going to approve this platform for research and testing, and you go try different use cases on it, and then come back with your thing that you want to productionize. I feel like we've sped that up, and we're deploying Copilot throughout the health system and all this kind of stuff. I'll tell you, my fear is that when people say they want to use AI, what they really want to do is advanced analytics and data processing with that AI, and setting up, having agreed upon accessible data for the AI is going to be the long pole in the tent, and that's going to disappoint people. So like when the scheduling thing you were just talking about right there, right? So what you need in that case is the ability to schedule a patient through an agent into a physician's specific schedule and have that template be accepting of that agentic workflow, and then also have your standard appointment types and all those things set up so that that workflow can work. The long pole in the tent there is not the AI. The long pole in the tent there is everyone agreeing upon how that is going to work and allowing it to work.
The humans.
Yes, and similarly, I spoke at our environmental services retreat recently. That team obviously has a ton of data that no one else is using, and they would love to process. And they're like, "Oh, when we turn on Copilot, can I just process this all using AI? Wouldn't that be wonderful?" And it's like, yeah, but you got to get the data into a database. You've got to make the data accessible to the AI. The AI has to have the metadata about the what is in the data set that you want to use. All of those things are just traditional data engineering or engineering problems that we have today, and we also have with AI. So I love the idea. I believe in accelerating the deployment of these technologies, and I want us to be lightweight about it, but I also want us to be realistic about the fact that it's not just a matter of flipping a switch and turning on AI. It's having the right infrastructure and the right data modeling in place to allow the AI to actually be useful and add value. Did that answer your question? Multiple questions?
Yes, but I'm not sure, like, how we're actually going to solve the problem. Like the
collaboration. I mean, I hate to sound like that, but I feel like that's actually the challenge for us, right? We have some structures in place, like our Access to Care program. It took a while to get off the ground, but there's been a ton of great work in there in terms of standardizing physician templates, scheduling, just like this boring boilerplate stuff. If we can find a way to make those collaborations easier, we gain more than just by turning on, Claude. I don't know. You don't look convinced. If someone wants to push back, go for it.
I completely agree, and I think this is a perfect example of AI not replacing humans. We need more humans to help with the data curation, familiarize themselves with the data, so that we as a team can make the data usable. We need people who are very familiar with these systems, these complex systems, to help architect it. I think that's one of the major limitations we have now. Maybe there's some fear that AI will replace people, but it's just, the way things go is that when we add more complexity to things, it doesn't simplify things. When we add more data, it complicates the kind of whole process, and we kind of need to rethink, and it turns out not to simplify things. It just adds more meaningful data to our time points.
Yeah, I'll throw in like something that's it's a little bit different because it gets at your governance question, but it also gets at nimbleness. So I think what's really critical at Columbia and then across the tripartite is a shared vision and leadership on the actual goals. What's the vision? What are the goals? And then the implementation from all levels of leadership to achieve those. So examples are you're trying to change the scheduling for your patient in Columbia Docs, Cornell Docs, and with NYP. 3 separate financial institutions, 3 separate systems, lots of different stakeholder needs and priorities, lots of opaqueness, right? We all understand this. We've been living here a long time. So without the leadership to actually say, well, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it with our partners, and to set the vision and the goals, then often the lowest common denominator of the local need, which is very important, is the strongest voice in the room. It also occurs if you don't have the vision and leadership around what your plan is for clinical or for research, that then the denominator that kind of rises to the top is security and privacy. And we all respect that, but we all have a lot of experience where that part seems to dominate the duration of time it takes to get something done. But that should be all part of teamwork. We should all be working together, whereby, you know, privacy officer and the legal side are aligned with the vision and leadership and the goals, and then it's much easier to move forward the contracts with a vendor or across the system, and it's not going back and forth in a kind of a lost environment for some time. So I think it's vision and leadership that has to come in this space, and then it's kind of getting through the system to say, well, okay, we're going to get the scheduling for all these clinics that are on different systems, and people have to just line up with that because that's what's coming. And that's unfortunately is governance, but it's not governance that should take, you know, 55 committee meetings. It's kind of make a decision and then you have to kind of move it forward. And that's been hard. At the same time, how do you encourage all flowers to bloom? And I think it's possible to do both. All flowers cannot bloom. Very few flowers can bloom if it's really hard to move things through the system. So helping things move through the system is important.
I will say, just in closing, I completely agree with you, Murdoch. Like, I think there's an instinct when things are challenging or when processes are challenging to go off and build your own thing or do your own thing in a silo, and you think it's going to be faster. And I just observed that fail so many times and actually be slower. So I'll leave this audience with that thought.
I see, Stella, you want to say something?
I was going to take this in a slightly different direction as more of an end user on the clinical radiology side, which is that, I mean, I feel like on some level we need more democratization and sharing and crowdsourcing of results and monitoring, right? And what we're finding with especially FDA cleared things, right? I mean, it's like the last week when I was sitting in vendor meetings, I was thinking, I wish we just had like a Netflix of AI, right? I just want to see the ratings, like your very basic reports on how things are going, how people like this thing, and then to look at everything. They have these hundreds and hundreds of algorithms on various vendors' platforms, and to have just more ability to democratize the availability of feedback and outcome.
One of the things that we see a lot in the AI governance committee is repetitive technologies. So we actually have put together a website. It'll be on the NYP Infonet. So if you have a CRID, you can go look at it, of all of the AI technologies that have come through AI governance. And it's eye-opening, right? We have 2 different technologies, for example, that improve the scan time for MRI. So 2 different people submitted those at different times. You know, people are interested in their own thing. The challenge is we don't do this in batches. We do it in an online way. So someone makes a decision, and then 6 months later, another contract's up for renewal. Someone makes a different decision. So we have a lot of duplication. To the extent that we can start to have conversations about, there are 16 things doing variations of the same thing. Maybe we only need 1. That will also help us speed up our processes.
I can share from the industry perspective on data becomes a key component to bring things together. As we are bringing a lot of these capabilities out there, I agree. And it's something we've been pushing is governance has started to get a negative connotation in a lot of places as well. Could it be actually be an accelerator? So we call accelerators, for instance, conversational agents, right? How do you have a playbook? That might have been mine. So for instance, like you're going to have a lot of digital assistants across multiple areas. How do you create playbook? That way there's a unified ecosystem of those things coming out. That way You provide governance or guardrails, but without having to making sure you have to go through every one of them to same process. That's one. Second is prioritization. Operational ones should go faster. Clinical ones might have different guardrails. So how do we balance it out over there will also be important. So finding a balance between clinical use cases, operational ones, which can go faster, is another way to think about it. The third piece, which is what you were alluding to, competition coming from outside, and it's going to happen. And part of my recent visits internationally was in Asia, China, and other places as well, not just in States, but outside. You're seeing a lot more adoption. Like there's a positive connotation on AI in general on how do we use it, how do we integrate, and some of them are through IRBs and others, but you're starting to see some of the, I was in one of the hospitals of the future, like multimodal data in the OR setting. Nurse staff is actually using those agents real time, getting that feedback. I was blown away in a lot of ways as well, capturing that data real time. How do you connect it across? So that's where you're going to see a lot more areas. There could also be opportunities at times when you're starting from ground up, like a lot of countries like Indonesia who are starting to create that infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure from ground up. They're thinking, you start to think in a slightly different way. Same thing in Dubai as well. Like when you start to think about some of those areas, it's going to be a different thing versus having legacy ecosystems and having to integrate across those workflows. So, but the world is converging and you're going to see a lot more acceleration. And that's how I see you would start to see some of that adoption internally as well.
So to follow up a little bit on that, again, with my engineering quantitative mind, I always think that there's a good way, it's good to have like quantitative metrics or what works and what doesn't work. And there's nothing better to how can I say, catalyze synergies and collaboration than some sort of quantitative metrics. And I don't want to sound like very kind of like blunt, pragmatic, but I do think that an interesting way to accelerate the translation of these tools is to actually define an ROI. I have yet to see an AI tool that has a quantifiable ROI, return on investment. And I don't necessarily mean a monetary return on investment, although that would be good. Or for example, it reduces, workflow inefficiency by X%. It increases your, patient satisfaction by this %. It does better in some way. And I think those metrics are important for catalyzing the translation because everybody has opinions about it, obviously. But hey, if it could increase your whatever, by 30%, that sounds pretty good for a department chair or for a dean or whatever to kind of help catalyze, or the hospital, this kind of pathways. So from your respective roles, what could be some metrics that could be useful to see improvement on, like you would think could catalyze this type of translations, for example?
How many of you would accept an AI read on your radiology report? Anybody? Just want to see a show of hands. Wow, that's surprising. And how many of you would pay extra for an AI read on top of your radiologist's read? Yeah, very few, right? So then in the end, if we're paying per click, if we're paying, Rob. Well, that was subsumed in the first question, I think, Roman. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, I think, to gain public trust. I don't know exactly how you measure that or track that, but it's really important. And until then, our ROI is affected by how we're going to recover the cost of such an expensive system and how the pricing model works and how expensive it was to develop all that and invest in multi-site large validation trials, et cetera, et cetera. It's more of a question than an answer.
I think that's an interesting question, and the answer is that it's happening regardless of what we think in an academic center. Right? They're doing it across the street. They're putting mammograms in Walmarts. Very soon, Amazon or whatever may be referring you to somebody who does virtual appointments and does everything virtually, and an agent schedule. I think one thing that we don't appreciate as much, and that this world, it may not matter very much what we think in academic medicine. So I think it's important that we decide what we think, because otherwise, just the environment around us will decide, and we won't have a say or really a footprint in that direction. We'll keep talking about how things should be done. Well, things are getting done outside our fortress, right? So I think we should be more proactive than reactive, in my view.
So you're saying part of the ROI is our ability to compete with competitor institutions?
Of course, not just institutions, like the reality of the world. It's like, do we want to remain relevant in this sense or not? Because I think the AI revolution has a lot of potential of making us irrelevant, because we are so reactive versus proactive that we're gonna be behind. We're gonna be behind of how the world and healthcare will transform. Because let's say if Copilot can reduce the time, as a simple investigator, what do I know? I write grants and I publish papers, right? So I don't see patients, I make AI, it's all good and fun. But if it can reduce the time that I write a grant by 30 to 40%, simple task, not even as complicated. Like imagine other entities that are more agile can reduce their, I hate to say it, even their workforce or workflow inefficiencies or whatever, in a way that's more attractive to patients down the road, even to students. We keep fighting about how we gonna use, let's say, ChatGPT in homework. I mean, this is gonna be done in 5 years. I feel like we're having the fight, or are we going to use calculator to do math homework? It's happening, right? And so we keep talking about all these things, and I think entities that recognize that this is happening and just go with it are going to outpace us, of course.
Just to add to your point, it's really important, and that's where when we're looking into solving some of the problems, starting with the outcome in mind. What is the outcome that we're trying to drive? That could be on the efficiency side. That could be reducing the overall workflow. So I have tons of examples on that. Maybe I'll allude to a couple of them. In radiation therapy, we have a digital software, IRT, which is really to streamline radiation therapy treatment to planning operation. In the past, it used to take 7 days to get that treatment to planning going. With AI, a lot of different AI capabilities inside. You don't start with AI first, but how do you integrate across the workflow? That 7 days is now reduced to 7 minutes. So that combines a lot of capabilities, bringing digital solutions as well as AI solutions together to really combine and really refine those use cases. And that's the ROI, right? Like you're talking about from patient perspective, who would have to wait 7 days for the simulation and everything to going, now to 7 minutes. So that's a huge impact. On the other side, the example is on the scanner itself. Like if you look into MR, it could take 30, 40 minutes. So with one of the AI technologies that we have, Sonic DL, for the cardiac scan, it reduces scan by 83% time with better image quality. Now what it entails is now the same workforce, if in the past you could do 3 scans, now you could do 6 scans, 9 scans with the same workforce in its best. So it improves the hospital operations throughput, it improves the image quality, but it's also an access play. Like in the past, a lot of patients with arrhythmia who could not sit in an MR machine for 30, 40 minutes, now because it's going to be 5 minutes, they can actually sit in. So that's where when you start to bring in technologies that touch on those areas, you see a lot of value, you see a lot of adoption. On co-pilots, there's been a lot of discussions happening. That is for individual productivity, and I completely agree. That's something everyone will start to look into that. But what is the outcome that we're trying to drive? So if you hone in on areas, what is the output that we are trying to drive, it really helps. Then AI becomes a means versus starting from AI first. And that's where we encourage when we're looking into any product direction, start with the outcome. What is the outcome that you're trying to drive? What are the inefficiencies? Then you could bring out digital solutions, you could bring out AI or any other technology into that place as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that principle. And as academics, we can actually approach this scientifically. So that's probably an advantage. It also means we're pretty slow and we have to think about it and all that stuff. But there's a whole science of looking at the outcome. What is the impact you want to have? So let's say we're talking about clinical patient care. Well, the impact, if we're really serious about some of the technologies, we say, well, how is this going to affect the outcome of heart failure patients' readmissions, or some other metric of care, real metrics, death, quality of life, and all these relate to costs. You can decide what your outcome is, what your impact is, but designing for the impact and the outcome. And there's approaches that you can take, different approaches to this that have already been well standardized across the industry. So biotech and pharma, but especially in the biotech commercialization space, the first and most important thing to do is evaluate the competitive landscape, and the second and most important thing to do is kill projects. Right? And so we do this a little bit, offers there. We do this a little bit right here when we're trying to do our commercialization stuff. We've gotten better at it, but the marketplace does this very efficiently. But people design it that way. They're designing their functions to say, this is the outcome I want, here's the impact we're going, what is out there that does it already? Oh, this is out there, it's better than that, and I'm thinking about, let's stop here. Let's stop this project. Let's stop working and say no to the investigator or say no to the person who's in the clinical operations. Like, there's a better way to do that. We just have to work out how to get that tool or move forward. And second is when you're doing something and it's not improving things, you just have to stop doing it. So I think the commercialization mindset, is very important. It's different in the therapeutics development where the costs and the time are much different. To some extent, that's really not true here, and you want to get out of the way and let things just grow. But if you don't look at the potential for what the outcome is, reducing the time from 7 days to 7 minutes, that's the outcome you're looking for, or 10% of the time on the scanner, which really facilitates patients as well as productivity, then you're not looking at the competitive landscape. You're not thinking about what you're actually going to do, and you're not thinking about how you would know if you were getting success or not. On a translational science, there's a whole series of kind of science from engineering, but science from medicine as well, and implementation science. And there's something called the translational science benefits model, which some people know about. Probably 50 or 60 institutions use it as part of their translational science evaluations to say, what is the impact we were trying to achieve? What are the outcomes that will get us there? What's the long-term indicators? What's the intermediate indicators? What are the short-term indicators? And you don't design anything until you've had a look at that at the beginning. So we could probably do better. We could do better on the competitive landscape because of that science that we can bring into the room. I think a lot of AI is being designed right now and being used in ways that are not productive. And that really will not prove to be productive, and they'll over time they'll weed out of the system probably, but some of them won't. And we'll have people who think they're improving their health by doing certain things, but there's no data to prove from trials of that is improving health. So I'll finish with this one. NYU took a look at its kind of learning health system operations, maybe a decade ago, in the publishing in a journal paper, and they had 10 or 11 things that they were doing, which they believed were innovations in the health system that improved the practice, like faster scheduling time, better turnaround. It was implemented in the system, and they had, just most of it was, computation at the time in some way, maybe not high-end LLMs. Of those 10 things, they did trials, A/B trials, of like saying, okay, let's test it. We never tested it. We think this is the best practice. We implemented it. So let's test these 11 things. Out of the 11 things, I think 10 of them were no better than what they'd been doing before, when they did the trial. So I think we have to be willing to do real trials. And as academics, we can do real trials because we know how to do them. We can bring scientific design to the trials. They can be adaptive and rapid trials. But we should be able to do trials in the health system, whether it's the hospital or the outpatient side, which tests two things that are AI algorithms, but they're designed for a care improvement, or they're designed to make it easier for the workforce, or to write your grant faster. I'd love if somebody could do that, because I have to put one in tomorrow and I'm still like under the gun.
Let's talk later.
I gotta go.
Just one note on that. First, I think AI has somehow connected your brain to Greg Hrubies, who's our director of healthcare delivery and evaluation, who is talking about A/B testing all the time, right? Because that's the gold standard. But on that front, it's interesting to watch the AI conversation yield all these other conversations about ROI, because AI is expensive, it's unknown, there's the data centers, there's the environmental impact, people are very concerned about ROI. But a lot of the questions that we're asking are things we should be asking of all technologies. And I talk to our procurement team all the time about this. Like, you buy a surgical robot, what's the ROI? Do we do a good job of quantifying that? I don't know, you buy some widget over another widget. It's the same conversation, and it's equally hard to test. So just because it's AI doesn't necessitate a greater degree of, angina about ROI. That's just part of our technology process in general, in my opinion.
Just to close out, the two examples I gave, if I had started on what it enables is segmentation algorithms for contouring organ at risk, that's a different set of problem. It is used within those, like when we talk about treatment planning, reducing the time from, it uses 10 different AI algorithms in itself. You can plug and play different algorithms, which might work, which might not work. So starting from the outcome, exactly, like AI becomes a means for that. And as you would look into any other technology, like robotics and others, and then see which one is working, and then you can swap it out, see which one gives you value, is where a lot of discussions need to happen, even at, I would say, sourcing, procurement level as well. Because then when you're looking at the output, now AI is a means for that. Now you can use a technology that's working today, but in a year, you might want to be looking into completely different technology, right? So if you think from that lens, it just makes those discussions easier, and everyone is more aligned, because everyone is starting to go, okay, this is the outcome we need to achieve. This is where we can bring cybersecurity. We can bring in our digital teams, our AI teams, our clinical teams, all of them together aligned towards one goal in mind as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think as I was listening to you talk about it, and you brought the perfect example of like how AI took over jobs. Like that was kind of my job, like spending years training PhD students how to develop segmentation algorithms, and how many theses have been written in the field of computer science around this, and students spending years. And now we have foundation models. So sort of AI took over our job, really. But what's happening now is, humans with AI are replacing, in many ways, in our field, which is more kind of like the basic science of AI, the people who are not using it. And I think this is probably what's going to happen with other domains as well. Do you have a little more time to take some? I know we started a little bit late, so if there's any questions from the audience we could entertain at this point, I'm happy to open up the panel a little bit, and then we can wrap it up. All right. I guess we're good. We're on time and ready for lunch.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much for
we're
coming.
ready to eat. So downstairs on the first floor, we have a number of people who have brought posters in too. So I encourage you to see the work that people are presenting while you're eating and meeting others. Thank you so much for joining us today.